What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Doctor Who review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 10th Doctor David Tennant story 42. It's another episode from Series 3, and it's an episode that, to be honest, a lot of people really don't like. This is an episode, I believe the first episode written by Chris Chibnall, that people really don't like this episode. They find it, I don't know, boring, or just they don't like the plot. I don't really know. I'm going to be honest, before we even get into this review, I went into this review knowing that I actually do quite like this story. I think it's actually a pretty good one. One of Chibnall's best, in my opinion. I really don't think this is a bad story at all. And spoiler alert, even after this review, that stays the same. I think this, it's nothing absolutely groundbreaking, but I think this is a pretty good story. So you'll see what I think about it, my thoughts and everything in the review. But let's get started with the cast. David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. Really, really good in this one. I think David Tennant's performance is great, mainly when he gets frozen, because he gets taken over, and we'll talk about it later, but he gets taken over by the kind of the sun creature, the alive sun, and has to be put into the kind of MRI scanny type thing to be like frozen, to kind of freeze it out of him. And the acting there, how scared he is, it's just something that we don't see very often from the Doctor, and I think David Tennant does such a good job there. The rest of the episode, there's nothing absolutely outstanding in the rest of the episode, but that one kind of scene and that one part of the episode itself just absolutely, I think, is so good for David Tennant. Freema Agyeman as Martha Jones. Yeah, she's pretty good in this one. She spends most of her time with one of the characters. I can't remember his name. But she spends most of the episode with him instead of with the Doctor. They, of course, get jettisoned out towards the sun, and, has some moments with her mum on the phone as well. So a few nice character pieces with Martha in this one, and all around, she's pretty good. Right, so let's get into some points about this episode. A ship that's going to crash into the sun in 42 minutes. That is the premise of this episode. 42 minutes, which is about how long an episode is, 45 minutes-ish. 42 minutes until the ship crashes into the sun. That is what is told in the kind of cold open. I think really cool idea. I think a lot of people don't like this idea of, it's so gimmicky, to have kind of a real-time countdown. I don't know if the real-time thing really comes across massively, but the pacing is okay. There are some things that aren't great, and we'll get into that later, but yeah, I like the gimmick of 42 minutes, roughly the same length of time as the episode. Until disaster happens, we have to fix things in that time. I think it's a pretty clever thing. I like it. The doors are deadlock sealed with a bunch of random questions. Now, this is another one of the parts that I think a lot of people dislike, and I will be honest, it is the weakest part of the story. If you didn't have this in there, this would be a very slow episode. You'd have to get something else in there, but basically to get to the I can't even remember what it is, to get to the engines or something, they have to go through all these doors, which is ridiculously inconvenient and terrible in an emergency situation like this. It's just, that absolutely doesn't make any sense. I don't know if people mark this one down purely because of that reason. It is by far the worst part of this episode, for sure. Yeah, if they just didn't have that, there wouldn't really be an episode here, I guess. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more I do think, yeah, it's not great, but it is what it is. Martha rings her mum to answer one of the questions. So I think the question they need to answer is who had more number one hits or something, the Beatles or Elvis, and Martha doesn't know the answer. She rings up her mum to ask the question. I thought that was a nice little moment, talking with her mum. She of course rings her again later on as well when they're in the escape pod. But yeah, once again, don't really like the whole question thing, but it did at least bring up this nice moment. Corwin has been infected by something. So the first person to be infected is Corwin, who is, what's her name? I think I've got her name in here somewhere. Let me have a look through my notes. McDonnell. He is McDonnell's husband, and he's the first one to be infected with this kind of sun it's not even a virus. He is infected by the sun, the living sun. He's the first one to have that happen to, and yeah, it's I quite like the villain of this episode. I think it's a pretty cool, somewhat unique sort of concept. I like it. Corwin shares the infection with Ashton. So yes, I think he's already killed someone by this point. The woman who isn't she the woman who also played Rosa? I believe that's the same actress later on. But then he actually the bald kind of engineer guy. He yeah, instead of killing him, he actually turns him. He kind of shares the infection, shares the sun with him. So now there's two of them on the ship. Martha gets trapped in a jettison pod. Yes, Martha and the guy that I can't remember his name, they get trapped and, yeah, get basically sent towards the sun. And I think that's, I mean, we obviously know that she's going to get saved. I mean, we're not going to have Martha going away this early into the season. We're like midway through the season, if even that. That's not going to happen. But it adds a little bit of jeopardy, and if anything, it sets up that other phone call with her mum, which I think is a very important phone call for the rest of the series. So yeah, it's a good moment, having the silence as well, where you can't hear anything, and you have the doctor on the other end as they're going towards the sun, screaming, I will save you," I think is what he's saying, but you can't actually hear what he's saying, and it's just completely silent. I love that. The doctor saves Martha but gets infected by the sun. This is where for me it picks up. The doctor saves Martha. He's outside the ship, hanging outside the ship. He's in his good old orangey red. I can't remember. It might be the red one. Is it orange or red in this episode? I can't quite remember. But he's in the space suit, and he has to smack a button outside the ship, which once again, very inconvenient mechanism there. But hey ho, that is what it is. And yeah, he looks into the sun and gets infected himself. And as soon as that happens, that whole moment, and the doctor realizes what is actually happening here, because ultimately the day is saved kind of because the doctor gets infected. That happening to him helps him realize what is actually going on here, and that in turn saves the day. So I like that. The doctor is properly scared before getting the sun frozen out of him. So I mentioned this before. I love that scene when he goes into the thing and he's like, I'm scared, I'm terrified. He's visibly terrified, and he's saying, I'm really, really scared to Martha. And Martha's so calm about it as well. She's just like, don't worry about it. I'm right here with you. In you go. Start freezing him. It's like his performance and Freema's performance and the way the characters are written in that scene. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. I think it's so good. McDonald sacrifices herself to kill Corwin. So yes, in the end, McDonald does sacrifice herself, gets rid of Corwin. I believe by this point, Ashton is already dead, I think. I think Ashton's already dead by this point. And yeah, she clings on to Corwin, and they, she opens the door and they get sucked out into space. Really, really nice little moment there. He's been the villain from the start, her husband, and especially once she figures out what has actually happened here with, so what it was, what the thing was, they were mining kind of something from the sun, taking energy from the sun to use as fuel for their ship, I'm pretty sure. But they didn't know that this sun was alive. And once she figures all that out, she sacrifices herself to save everyone else on the ship. And I think it's a good moment. Giving the sun back its life particles and turning away to safety. Of course, it happens like with a second or two to spare, because of course it's going to. But I really like the moment they jettison all the particles back into the sun. It lets them go and they get out of there. The pod, of course, comes back when the doctor saves Martha as well. It's one of those very convenient right at the end sort of endings, but I still quite like it. So a rating for 42 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10, which is probably a lot higher than a lot of people would give this episode, but yeah, I like it. Yes, I don't like the whole questions thing. It's a bit of a gimmick. It just kind of pads the time, and it doesn't really make any sense. The, jettison pot, the kind of calling back the escape pod button being on the side of the ship outside is pretty silly and doesn't really make any sense, but it does make for a really interesting moment and the rest of the story with the Doctor. So I can kind of forgive that a little bit. It does take points off, but the rest of this episode, honestly, I really like. I like the stuff with the Doctor. I like what Martha's doing here. The guest cast are nothing special, but they're fine. And yeah, the villain, I think it's pretty cool. Literally a person, but they open up their visor and literally burn people to death. And the whole burn with me thing is a little bit silly. Yes, it's Doctor Who. I like it. I'm sorry. It's a 7.5 out of 10. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think of this episode. Am I the only one that actually likes this episode? Because, yeah, I've seen most people say they really don't like this one. And I just, other than the couple of issues that I've said, yes, I don't really understand it. I think it's actually a pretty good episode. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.